What the is this piece of
What's up, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and in a hilarious twist, Joe Rogan has now leaked the insane demands that Kamala Harris had to appear on the Joe Rogan podcast. And I've got a special announcement later in this video. It's not to sell you anything, no. But it's like Trump's team is just memeing on her now as, well, I guess I might as well just tell you now. JD Vance will now appear on the Joe Rogan podcast this week still, with Trump's episode nearing 40 million views. Obviously, JD Vance won't, do those kind of numbers. But again, if it means he can energize people to get out and vote, then that's worth his time. There's no singular place on the planet, really, that JD Vance can talk to as many young males who may be feeling displaced out there and energizing them to vote, then going on the Joe Rogan podcast, which I'm really hoping his message is. Now, let's get into all the hilarity. By the way, a lot of people ask, who makes my computer? What kind of computer did I use? For the past, 3-4 years, I've only ever used Meta PCs, promo code The Quartering. It's a computer I'm on right now. They do custom. This is actually the computer I'm on right now. They do custom builds. They have build order, completely custom, ready to ship. Laptops, cases, accessories, financing, and everything else. They've stood with me against cancel culture many times. So if you're in the market for a new computer, check out Meta PCs, promo code The Quartering. If you use their chat feature, tell them The Quartering sent you. And when you're in the market for a new PC, check them out. So Kamala's terms are, well, let's just go to actually Joe's tweet here. So Joe Rogan acknowledged that YouTube was suppressing his podcast. So he published it to X. Since there's an issue searching for the episode on YouTube, here's the full podcast with Trump. Currently has 5.7 million impressions, 170,000-ish likes. And, obviously, 37, 38 million people have watched it on his YouTube channel. It is the third most viewed video in his entire career, and deservedly so, and this is an episode that will probably pass, almost certainly, will be probably his second most viewed ever. It's hard to imagine it would ever pass Bob Lazar with 60 million views, but it's certainly going to get to 40 in just 3 days. And the Bob Lazar episode had 5 years to get here. So who knows how many people are going to go back and watch that kind of later. But then he writes, which is very interesting. And for the record, the Harris campaign has not passed on doing the podcast. They offered a date for Tuesday, which is today. But I would have had to travel to her, something he always refused to do for Trump, by the way. And they only wanted to do an hour. I strongly feel the best way to do this is in studio in Austin. My sincere wish is just have a nice conversation and to get to know her as a human being. I really hope we can make it happen. Essentially, Joe Rogan has rejected her absurd demand that he travel to her like she's the get. She went on one of the top 10 most popular podcasts in the world, Shannon Sharpe's podcast, and it didn't even crack 1 million views. He, using his platform, the audacity, imagine that. The audacity to be like, yeah, you can travel to me. I only have an hour for you. Because they know that there's no way this woman could talk for 3 hours. It's impossible. And the idea that she's busy doing other things is absurd. She took days off last week. And let's be honest, like I said, in no scenario would she be able to reach more people than going on Joe Rogan's podcast. None. So either she wants to win the election or she doesn't. The media, of course, is melting down about this. Joe Rogan shoots down Kamala Harris's podcast interview over campaign's demands. Insane demands, by the way. Demands that Joe Rogan has never been asked to meet for anyone else, but somehow has to meet them for Kamala Harris. I applaud Joe Rogan in just saying no. He doesn't need her. She needs him. The Rogan campaign has turned down the interview with Vice President Kamala Harris after campaign made several demands, but insisted he hopes it can still happen. The mega popular podcaster said the Democratic presidential nominee had wanted him to travel to her for the chat and only gave him 1 hour. They offered a date for Tuesday. I already read that. It comes just after former President Trump sat for a 3-hour in-studio interview on his Joe Rogan Experience on Friday. The highly anticipated interview with the Republican candidate has already racked up over 37 million views on YouTube since then. Meanwhile, Rogan's refusal to compromise with the Harris team followed up reports that he'd been in negotiations for a sit-down with her for weeks, but they opted to pull the plug. Rogan confirmed during a gab fest with Trump that talks to host Harris on his platform were still ongoing, but didn't elaborate further. Trump quickly seized on the opportunity, scoffing at the idea that Harris sitting down for a 3-hour interview, a common time frame for Rogan's show. Can you imagine Kamala doing the show? She'd be laying on the floor, Trump said. If she did this kind of interview with you, I hope she does because it would be a mess. And he's right. She simply cannot stay focused for 3 hours. But I'm supposed to believe she's going to sit in, 12-hour negotiation meetings, intense negotiation meetings with Xi Jinping or China or any of that kind of stuff, right? It's absurd. She's a joke. The media is melting down, coping. Joe Rogan refuses Kamala Harris's conditions for a podcast interview. How many people has Joe Rogan accepted conditions for, by the way? How many people has he said, okay, well, I don't think he's ever done it. Maybe early in his career. That's possible. I don't think the guy's ever done it. But of course, the spin, here's MSNBC, which is hilarious. Why Harris and Beyonce was a bigger deal than Trump and Rogan. What? Literally nobody on the planet. Hey, Onyx. Onyx, can you come on up? No, she won't do that. Onyx is up here today. She makes rare appearances on the podcast. She's my all-black German Shepherd. She's kind of a turd. Anyway, the 2 headline-grabbing events took place Friday. In the race for the president, the Republican Donald Trump sat down for a 3-hour interview with popular podcast host Joe Rogan, and Vice President Kamala Harris held the largest event of her campaign. The one where all these people were walking out. Attended by 30,000 people. That'd be a small group for a Trump rally, by the way. If the goals of these events were simply to generate media coverage, then it was about a tie? Bruh. A tie? 40 million people have watched Joe Rogan's interview on YouTube alone. And Spotify is his main platform. I don't think it's out of the question to say that 100 million people worldwide listen to this. When you include X and you include clips, 100 million. You mean that some stupid rally in Houston in a state where Kamala Harris isn't going to win the election is somehow big? Are you kidding me? Like, this is why people laugh. This is why people laugh at the fake news media. The Daily Beast. Joe Rogan snubs Kamala Harris podcast request. What? The former president and current Republican frontrunner or current Republican nominee didn't tell Joe Rogan he had any demands that we know of. Maybe he said, hey, we can't talk about X, Y, and Z. Maybe. I mean, certainly there are things that he legally can't talk about. But I mean, are you kidding? The cope is unbelievable. What? Joe Rogan turns it down. So now they're blaming Joe Rogan. The mainstream media is blaming Joe Rogan because he didn't want to travel to Kamala Harris for just a crumb of her time. For just 60 minutes, he would have to travel, presumably for over a day. This is what the Daily Beast had to say. Well, almost every interviewer on the planet would have jumped at a chance to sit down with Harris for a full hour. The world's most successful podcaster decided he would not compromise. What are you talking about? Would I interview Kamala Harris? Yeah, because it would be hilarious. I wouldn't see it as an opportunity. And again, with just the election just 1 week away, he did not rule out further compromise that sits on both sides. I really hope we can make it happen. And I actually do believe that Joe does. because Joe doesn't want to be labeled a Trump guy, even though he is. Joe doesn't want to appear to be biased. But I think that he stood on business and said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to travel to you and bend the knee. Essentially, this was a pathetic power move by Kamala Harris that Joe Rogan probably saw many other, they saw coming a mile away. Rogan, who the election has turned into some sort of latter-day David Frost, interviewed Harris's Republican rival, former President Trump, on Friday. Their 3-hour T-Day, I don't know, was released the next day, and it's garnered 37 million views on YouTube alone. Well, yeah. And at no point, by the way, are they saying that Kamala Harris should do this. Trump, for example, left a Michigan crowd waiting for 3 hours in the cold. As many as half of those showed up, according to attendees, because of how long the Rogan interview went on. Bro, it's not cold in Michigan in October. It was probably 60 or 70 degrees. What are you talking about? So somehow this is Trump's fault. I'm not kidding you. That's why. And by the way, why hasn't Kamala Harris gone on any white males podcasts? Does she hate white males and Jews, apparently, because she turned down Lex Friedman? She has not gone on one intellectual podcast at all. But don't get tricked. Don't get tricked. I don't care what Polymarket says. I don't care if Polymarket says Donald Trump has a 99% chance of winning, even though he has now opened his largest lead at roughly 34 points. The way Polymarket rounds, it doesn't mean anything. Have you voted? Have you voted in early in person? Do you have a voting plan for Election Day? I hope you do. I hope you go early. If you can't go early on Election Day, please vote early in person. And in a stunning twist, now JD Vance will sit down with Joe Rogan. And I actually think JD Vance will do a better job mobilizing people. Now, I hear you, hardcore Trump fans. You don't like it when I say anything negative about Trump, even though I'm about to vote for, I've already voted for him 3 times. JD Vance will do better, I think, at appearing more likable, more even-keeled, more relatable than Donald Trump. And hopefully he will use that to actually make a direct call out to tell people, hey, get out there and vote, man. The fact that Trump's rival, Donald Trump's running mate JD Vance is expected to record an interview with a popular podcast host on Wednesday morning. That's tomorrow. In an attempt to reach less likely voters, according to 2 people with direct knowledge on the matter. They offered it, and this is after Kamala Harris said no. So not only did Kamala Harris not even bother going on the world's biggest podcast, but Trump went on, and now the vice presidential candidate, JD Vance, went on. So if Trump wins the election, and I hope he does, that increases the chances of JD Vance running for president in 2028, which thus far on the campaign trail, I think he's earned. We'll see how he is as a vice president, obviously. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. But right now, I want people to get out there and vote, make a plan, vote early, in person, or if you're going to go out on Election Day, make sure you go early. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like on it. Don't forget to check out metapcs.com, promo code TheQuartering to save. And we'll talk to you again real soon.